Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 1 to 4 and 6-player game Dune Imperium Uprising, designed by Paul Dennen and published by Dire Wolf Digital, who helped sponsor this video. The great houses of the Imperium desire spice, a precious resource found on only one planet, Dune, and whoever controls the spice controls the universe. Based on the second Dune film from Legendary Pictures and the books by Frank Herbert, Uprising is also the second game in the Dune Imperium series. Although it shares some similarities with the original and is compatible with the previously released expansions, this standalone title has several new twists on the original design, with everything you need to play all in its own box. If you'd like to learn how to play the original Dune Imperium game, we have a separate tutorial for that, but you don't need to watch it to play Uprising because I'm going to cover everything in this video. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, place the double-sided game board in the middle of the play area. The side with the letter A and C in this corner is for the special 6-player 3 versus 3 mode of the game. When you have 1 to 4 players, you use this other side as we'll do here, and we'll assume that we have 3 players in this video. These are known as the Alliance tokens, and you set one onto each of the matching spaces for it here on this left side of the board. And you'll notice the token will match that area's color and the symbol of the space it's going into. Then find this shield wall token and put it into the spot for it here on the board. The cards with these backs are known as the conflicts, which you separate into 3 shuffled piles based on their 1, 2, and 3 values here. Set all of the conflict 3 cards into a face-down pile on this space of the board, adding 5 random conflict 2 cards on top of that, and a random conflict 1 card on top of that. The rest you return unseen to the box. The Intrigue cards, which have this back, you then shuffle and set face down by the board. But be aware, there are 4 Intrigue cards which have what is known as this CHOAM symbol here at the top beside their title. And these are only used when you're playing with the optional included CHOAM module, but they don't recommend this for your first game. So we'll return these to the box and discuss the CHOAM module briefly at the end of this video. There are several cards with this back, but they can be divided into 3 main types based on their titles at the top. Any with a white background behind their top text, like the ones we see here, are known as reserve cards. Separate these into 2 face-up decks of matching cards, one with all the Prepare the Way cards, and the other with all copies of The Spice Must Flow. The rest of the cards with this back have a black background behind their titles at the top. But you'll now remove and set aside any that also have an arrow to the left of their name. Those we'll use later. The rest make up what is known as the Imperium deck. However, if you go through these, you'll find 4 that have that CHOAM symbol in their top left-hand corner that we saw earlier. And again, these are only used if you're using that optional module, which we aren't in this case. So we'll just return these 4 cards to the box. All the remaining cards in the Imperium deck we shuffle, placing them face down next to the board, dealing 5 cards from the top of this deck into what is known as the Imperium row, and just leave some room to the right of it for the 2 reserve decks that you'd created earlier. Now create a general supply of these spice, solari, and water resources, along with what are known as the 4 maker hook tokens. I'm organizing these into some trays that I have, but notice the different sized pieces. A smaller piece counts as 1 of that type of resource, and a larger piece counts as 5. Also create a supply of sandworms. 2 options are included, plastic and wooden, and you can use either or both in your game. Just be aware, other than the maker hook tokens, none of these are considered limited. So if you would run out of any of these pieces while playing, just use a suitable replacement. Every player now picks one of the 9 included leaders, but notice this one has the CHOAM icon in its corner, so you can only pick this leader if you're using that module, which we aren't, so we'll set it aside. You'll also notice that all of the leaders have 1, 2, or 3 dots by their name, and the more dots, the more strategically complex that leader is to use. For your first game, they recommend picking leaders with only 1 dot, as we'll do here. And if anyone picks this Harkonnen leader, make sure to give them this white cube, which they set into the space for it here. Then give each player an unpicked leader to flip over, where you'll find a player aid that you can use during the game. Remember the cards with an arrow by their name that we had set aside earlier? Organize them into 4 sets, each containing 2 Dune the Desert planets, 2 convincing arguments, 2 daggers, 1 reconnaissance, 1 seek allies, 1 diplomacy, and 1 signet ring. Each player takes one of these sets and shuffles it into a face-down deck to the left of their leader, returning any unused leaders and decks back to the box. Now I should also point out, the game does come with some other cards that also have the white arrow by their titles, but they also have these other 2 symbols in their other corners. And these decks are only used when you're playing the 6-player game, so just make sure you don't get these mixed in with the other cards we've been talking about so far. Every player now picks a color and takes the matching components, which include what are known as their agents, discs, cubes, spies, control, and combat marker. Add 2 of your agents to your leader, and then set the other one, known as your Swordmaster, beside the board. Then add 1 of your discs to the 0 space of this score track, unless you have 4 players, in which case everyone begins with their marker on the 1-point space. Next, add your combat marker to the 0 space of this combat track, and 3 of your cubes to one of the circles in this area, which you'll use for the rest of the game. So each player should pick a circle that's closest to them at the table. Below each alliance token that we placed earlier, you'll find tracks, and every player now sets a cube onto the bottom row of each of those tracks. All your remaining components, a single disc, 9 cubes, 3 spies, and 3 control markers, are kept in a personal supply where everyone can see them. And then each player collects 1 water resource. Cards with this back are objectives, and some are marked for specific player counts, so return any to the box that don't match your numbers. For example, we have a 3-player game here, so we'd return the 2 cards marked for 4 and 6-player games. The rest you then shuffle, dealing 1 randomly to each of the players. Each player reveals their objective, placing it face up in their supply where everyone can see it. One of these will show this first player's symbol. The player with that objective will collect this related token, making them the first player. Now I should also mention, if you're setting up a solo or 2-player game, there are additional steps for setting up found in this separate booklet that I won't be going over now, but that we'll discuss briefly at the end of this video. Otherwise, that's the setup. In Dune Imperium Uprising, you and the other players are vying for domination through combat, alliances, and resources which can gain you victory points. Have the most points by the end of the game, and you win. The game is played over a series of rounds, and each round is broken into 5 phases, starting with the round start phase. Here, you flip over the top card of the conflict deck into this space. This will show the potential rewards available for players who participate and succeed in the combat phase that occurs later. Then, each player draws 5 cards from their personal deck, forming their hand for the round. You only have a few cards in your deck, so in a later round, you'll eventually run out of cards to draw. Anytime you're required to draw when your deck is empty, stop and shuffle the discard pile you'll have made here into a new deck, and then continue drawing as many cards as you were owed. Either way, with your 5 cards drawn, it's time for the second phase of the round, player turns. Starting with the person holding the first player token and going clockwise around and around the table, each person will either take an agent or reveal turn. To take an agent turn, you must have one of your agent pieces on your leader card. If you didn't, then you'd have to take a reveal turn instead. We'll discuss reveal turns in detail later, but just know, after taking one, your turns are skipped for the rest of the phase while the other players continue taking turns. And once everyone has taken a reveal turn, the phase ends. Now you can take a reveal turn even if you have available agents, but normally players will take agent turns until they have none left, and then take their reveal turn. And with that in mind, let's go back to the table and see what taking an agent turn looks like. Here, you play any 1 card from your hand face up in front of you, checking for any icons along its left side edge. And you'll find anywhere from 0 to 7 of these symbols known as agent icons. These represent different political groups and organizations that you can send one of your agents to on the board if the space doesn't already have an agent and is marked with a symbol matching one on the card that you've played. Spaces are shaped like this, and the agent icon you need to play in order to travel to one will be shown in its top left-hand corner. So playing this signet ring means that I could send one of my agents to a space marked with a Lancerod, or a city, or a spice trade icon. And that includes any of the spaces within this area, but not spaces like here, here, or here, as they have different icons. To travel to spaces like these, you'd need to play a card showing one of their icons. And remember, you can't travel to a location that already has an agent in it, yours or another player's. If you see any symbols beneath the agent icon of a space, that's an additional cost you must immediately pay. For example, going to Haga Basin requires playing a card with the spice trade icon and then paying 1 water. Costs like this, you return from the area in front of you to the general supply. Once you've played a card and paid any required cost of the space, you move your agent from your leader mat to that space and gain the benefits showing to its right, along with any benefits on this gray line of the card you played to travel here, known as its agent box. And you can resolve those benefits in any order, but you must resolve all benefits you're owed, unless they require paying a cost, in which case you can choose not to resolve those benefits if you'd rather avoid the related cost. And we'll learn how to identify and resolve cost-based benefits a little later. This is the symbol for the spice resource, so going here gains you 2 from the supply. And as we'll see later, additional spice may end up here, and if so, you'd collect that as well. Instead of gaining spice, this space shows the symbol for sandworms, but we'll come back and discuss that benefit later. Either way, remember, in addition to the benefits of the space, you may also resolve your agent box here, which in this case shows the signet ring symbol. This means you get to resolve the special signet ring ability of your leader shown in this area of their card. This symbol here means we draw a card from the top of our deck. Every leader also has a unique passive ability in the area here, which can be used anytime it applies. As you can probably tell, the player turns phase offers all kinds of options. You'll examine your cards to see what areas you can send an agent to and what specific effects the cards will provide. And every space of the board has its own unique benefits, which are all explained in detail on the included board space guide. The back of the rulebook also explains every symbol you'll encounter, but I want to go over enough of the spaces with you so you'll be able to understand any of the symbols you run into while playing. Anytime you see a gray cube on a space you've gone to, or on a card you've played, recruit a single troop for each one. Now, this is not a card you'll find in your opening deck, but we'll see how you can acquire new cards like this one a little later. We'll pretend instead you'd played this card, which you'll find in your starting deck, to get to this space. Either way, to resolve the recruit symbol, take a troop cube from your supply and put it into your garrison, which is the circle here closest to your seat at the table. Now, if you ever run out of troops in your supply, you can't add more until you get some back. After adding a troop to your garrison, then check the space you just assigned your agent to. If it shows a desert illustration and cross swords in its corner here, it's a combat space, and that means you can move any number of the troops you just recruited this turn from your garrison directly to the quadrant of this area here closest to your garrison, known as the conflict. Then, whether you moved any of those newly recruited troops or not, you may move up to 2 more that were already in your garrison over to the conflict. But again, you can only add troops to the conflict in this way if your agent just went to a combat space. For example, going here allows me to recruit 4 troops, but since there's no desert illustration or swords in the corner of this space, it means I'd move 4 units from my supply to the garrison, but none of my troops would be able to enter the conflict at this time. Some of the combat spaces on the board that you go to won't give you any new troops to add to your garrison as part of their benefit. But don't forget, anytime you go to a combat space, in addition to any troops you recruited, 0 in this case, you can always move up to 2 troops already in your garrison to the conflict. And remember, the option to move up to 2 means you could just move 1 or none at all. Either way, the more troops you have in the conflict, the better chance you'll have of winning it and gaining the best rewards from this card, as we'll learn about later. Now that we've discussed several aspects related to gaining troops, let me give you a quick summary to ensure it's all clear. There are 3 main places your troops will be located: in your supply, in your garrison, or in your quadrant of this conflict area. By sending an agent to a combat space, you can send any number of the troops you just recruited directly into the conflict if you want. But whether you recruited any troops or not, as long as you just went to a combat space, you can always move up to 2 troops from your garrison into the conflict. Anytime you're allowed to recruit, but run out of troops in your supply, just recruit as many as you can and ignore the extras. And don't worry that you don't understand the importance of troops in your garrison versus the conflict area just yet. This will all make more sense once we see how the conflict is resolved later. All right, now let's look at a few other symbols you'll find on the board, like this Solari symbol that allows you to gain that many from the supply. So 5 in this case. But don't forget, these larger resource pieces also count as 5, so you could collect one of these instead. When you see an arrow like this, it represents paying a cost. So you can go here and pay no spice to gain 2 Solari, or return 1 spice you have back to the supply to gain 4 Solari. Anytime you see this symbol, you gain an Intrigue card from the top of this deck. Now, you can examine your own Intrigue cards at any time, but you'll want to keep them a secret from the other players. These come in 3 main categories, as shown on their bottom, known as plot, combat, or endgame. Now, there are a few that combine more than one type and can be played as either. Combat and endgame effects we'll learn about later. Plots, however, like the one we see here, can be played at any time during any of your agent or reveal turns, providing you with the benefit shown on them, many of which you'll understand better as we go through the rest of the symbols on the board. So let's go back and look at some more of those. The first player to assign their agent to this space must pay 8 Solari, and then the benefit here means that they gain their Swordmaster. This is the extra agent all players have by the board at the start of the game. After gaining your Swordmaster, move it to your leader mat, and now you'll have it to assign for future agent turns as well. As soon as at least one player has acquired their Swordmaster, all other players who go here in the future only have to pay 6 Solari to gain their Swordmaster. Over the course of the game, each player may only come to this space a single time, as you're reminded of here. Looking at this space, we see an X symbol. This represents a trash effect. And in this case, the trash effect is on top of an Intrigue card symbol. That means you go through your Intrigue cards and trash any one of them. If you do that in this case, you then get to draw a new Intrigue card from the top of the deck. Going to this space gives you access to a different type of trash benefit that targets Imperium cards. This means you trash any card in your hand, or any card in your discard pile, or any card face up in front of you that you'd played this round. When you trash a card, you just remove it from the game, returning it to the box. But this can be a good thing. As we'll see, over the course of the game, you'll be able to acquire newer and better cards than the ones you started with, and trashing the weaker cards means that as you draw through your deck, the hands you get will improve, giving you better symbols and abilities to resolve. Going back to this space, in addition to trashing an Intrigue card to draw a new one, you also draw a card from your deck. And this symbol here means you can recall an agent. That means you pick any other agent, other than the one that you just played, and return it to your leader mat. You'll now be able to use this agent again this round. When you go to this secret space, the first symbol, as we saw earlier, allows you to draw an Intrigue card. Then the symbol here means that each player who is holding 4 or more Intrigue cards must randomly give you one of theirs. I should point out that this space, along with the others in this column, are associated with one of the 4 powerful factions of the Dune universe. And there are 2 spaces for each of the different factions. And these can be identified by their colors, related symbols, and the names of the factions printed here. Anytime you assign an agent to a space related to one of these factions, you also go up in influence within that related faction by moving your colored cube up 1 space along this track. Some card effects provide influence in these factions, showing either their related symbol or a question mark, meaning you can choose which faction your influence will change in. The number of gold upward or red downward arrows indicates how far you move in either direction. We haven't seen this symbol before, but if we were resolving this card, this effect means that you must discard a card from your hand, and then you go up in influence in either of these two factions. Let's say we chose this faction and discarded a card from our hand. We then move our marker here. On the other hand, if we were resolving this top effect, this means we move our influence down one space in any one faction, and then we can increase it one space in any one faction. If we also decided to spend 3 spice, we could then go up one space on any of the tracks. Now, as soon as you reach the second level in any faction's influence, you'll see this symbol, which represents gaining a victory point. Anytime you gain victory points during the game, move your marker one space up on this track. If you ever drop below 2 influence in a faction, you then lose the related victory point you'd gained earlier from it and adjust your marker accordingly. If you reach the 4th level of influence within a faction, which is its first brown space, then you gain the bonus that's showing there, an Intrigue card in this situation, and if you later drop below that level, you don't return the bonus. But if you go back up to that level again, you do gain the bonus again. Also, the first person to reach the 4th level of influence is said to have secured an alliance with that faction and collects the related alliance token. They set it in front of themselves, gaining the victory point that's shown on it. As soon as another player enters this top area of the influence track and passes the player who currently has the alliance token, they take it from that player, causing that other player to lose its victory point as they gain it. Let's say you're the green player and you currently have the alliance token for this faction. If you get to the top space of that influence track while there, since no other player can go higher than you, your alliance token is safe. On the other hand, if you now lose influence, this player is higher than you, so you would have to give them your alliance token. Let's say while they had it, they lost an influence. They wouldn't have to give it to anyone yet because there's no player higher than them. But now, if they lost an influence and dropped to here, since there are 2 players who are tied in influence above them, they would pick which of those players to give the alliance token to. Let's say these other markers were here, meaning this player currently had the alliance token. If they lost influence now, since there is no one with influence higher than them, and because they've dropped below this 4th level, they must return the alliance token to this space. The next player able to move into this 4th influence space would then collect the alliance token and the point that goes with it. So that covers the rules for these influence tracks. And anytime you play a card to go to one of these faction spaces, as long as you pay any related costs first, you can resolve the benefits of the space, your card's effect, and the influence track in any order. With influence understood, I can now explain an additional cost that will appear in this area of some spaces. To go here, you need to play a card showing the city agent icon, but must also have 2 influence in the Fremen faction, which this symbol represents, which just means my influence marker would have to be on this space or higher of this Fremen track. Some of the symbols on this space we've seen before, but this one is new. Resolving this symbol means that you collect one of these maker hook markers from the supply and add it to this area of your garrison. If you already have a maker hook here, then resolving this effect does nothing. Each player can only have, at most, one of these. Sometimes you'll see the maker hook symbol on an effect followed by a colon. This means that you must have a maker hook already in your garrison to resolve the symbols on the other side of that colon. In this case, 2 sandworms. This allows you to move 2 sandworms from the supply to your area of the conflict. Sandworms are never added to your garrison. Remember, both the plastic and wooden figures count as sandworms, and these are not a limited supply, so if you would run out while playing, just use a suitable replacement. Later, we're going to learn how sandworms and troops in your conflict area will benefit you, but there's something about conflicts we need to understand right now. During the first phase of the round, we flip the top card of the conflict deck face up, and this lets you know the rewards you can gain from winning the conflict that will come later. And their name here gives you a thematic sense of the battle that will occur. Most conflicts, like this one, will have a red-colored background. But others, like the one we see here, have a brown desert-colored background, and the name on these will always relate to one of 3 specific spaces on the board. These spaces are known as the Spice Refinery, Arakeen, and the Imperial Basin. When the conflict card for your round shows any one of their names, it means that the conflict the troops will participate in later is thematically happening in that area of the planet of Dune. Now this matters because all 3 of these spaces are surrounded by a bordered wall, which includes this token. And as long as this token is here, protecting the walls, and the conflict card has a brown background, then sandworms cannot be added to the conflict area, so ignore any effects that would try to. However, anytime you would resolve the effect of this symbol, you may, if you wish, remove the shield wall token, putting it beside the board. And when it's gone, sandworms may now be added to the conflict area. Just keep in mind if the conflict card has a red background, even if this token is in place, sandworms can still be summoned to the conflict area because thematically the conflict isn't happening in this area, but somewhere else on the planet of Dune. Also be aware, the shield wall doesn't prevent you from adding agents to any of these spaces. It only affects the potential placement of sandworms. So just to summarize, a sandworm icon will almost always require you to have a maker hook in order to bring it into the conflict. And if the current conflict has a brown background, the sandworm cannot be added to the conflict unless the shield wall token had previously been removed from the board. In rare cases, like we see with this Intrigue card, an effect will provide you with a sandworm without a maker hook showing to its left. This means that you can summon it with no maker hook in your garrison, but you must still respect the rules related to the restrictions of the shield wall. That said, the other effect on this card also allows you to break the shield wall when it's played. All right, that was an important look at conflicts, shield walls, and sandworms, but now let's continue looking at some more board spaces. The first time you send an agent to this space, add the counselor token you have in your personal supply to one of the unoccupied seats shown here, where it will stay for the rest of the game as a reminder that from now on, during each of your reveal turns, you'll earn an extra 2 persuasion, which is represented by this symbol. And we'll learn all about persuasion and how it's used when we explain reveal turns a little later in the video. Once you have your counselor in a seat, anytime you come to this space with an agent in the future, you instead resolve these secondary effects, gaining 2 spice, an intrigue card, and recruiting 3 troops. This space has a unique symbol that relates to tiles you'll have in these spaces if you're playing with the included CHOAM module. But in this setup, we aren't. So that means anytime you'd resolve an effect showing this symbol, you instead gain 2 Celeri, as we're reminded of here. Moving on, anytime you see this symbol, it means that you get to place one of your spies. Spies are these pieces, and they're taken from your supply and placed on any unoccupied observation post of the board, which are represented by these symbols. And you'll notice they're always connected to 1 or more spaces. Sometimes an effect will let you place a spy, but shows 1 or more agent icons with it, and that means the spy must go into an observation post connected to a space that shows one of those icons. Once you have spies on the board, playing a card like this allows you to assign an agent to any space matching any regular agent icons it might show, as usual. But if it also has this spy icon, you may instead use the card to assign your agent to any space connected to an observation post with one of your spies in it. Once you have spies on the board, you can then choose to recall them in order to gain one of 2 possible benefits. Normally, you can't send one of your agents to a space with an opponent's agent, but if you have a spy connected to that space, then you can play a card as normal, showing that location's agent icon, or the spy icon, to recall your spy at that location back to your supply, adding your agent there and resolving the space, even though it was occupied. Another way to recall a spy is to assign an agent to a space connected to one of your spies, and then you may choose to take the spy back in order to draw the top card from your deck into your hand. But you must choose to draw this card immediately after playing your agent and taking your spy back, but before resolving any other effects. Just be aware, you can't recall a single spy and perform both of those possible recall actions with it. You'll either recall a spy to go to an enemy agent's space with it, or to draw a card. There is one other way to recall a spy, and that's when you see this symbol. In this case, though, taking back a spy from the board is a cost to resolve some other aspect of the shown effect. So taking back a spy this way only gets you the benefit shown here, not any of the other recall benefits we discussed earlier. I should mention, if you're resolving a spy icon but have no spies left in your supply, you may take one from anywhere on the board and add it to an empty observation post. But taking a spy back in this way doesn't give you any of the recall benefits we previously discussed. With that, we've covered enough of the symbols that you should be able to resolve any space you've assigned an agent to. And remember, there's a sheet that goes over all of the spaces in detail, and the back of the rulebook also has a reference for every symbol you'll find in the game. That said, placing an agent isn't the only option you have on your turn. You may instead choose to take a reveal turn, unless you have no agents left on your leader mat. In that case, you have to take a reveal turn. And the first step of doing that is to reveal cards. Here, you reveal every unplayed card in your hand, putting them face up, but separate from the cards you had previously played during your agent turns. You then gain and resolve all the reveal effects of those revealed cards, which are located in the box found at the bottom with a blue background. Now, some of these symbols we've seen before, others might be new, but you resolve them in any order. If your reveal effects show any of these persuasion symbols, total and add them to any persuasion you might have earned during your agent turns. For example, by having your agent in this space. And don't forget, if you have your counselor here, you also earn 2 persuasion during every reveal turn. So in a case like this, I'd have a total of 6 persuasion. During the reveal turn, you can spend the persuasion you have to acquire new cards, both from the 5 face-up ones here that make up what is known as the Imperium row, and from these 2 piles in what are known as the reserve. And remember, all the cards within each stack are the same as one another. The cost to acquire a card is shown in its top right-hand corner, and you can acquire as many cards as you like as long as you have the persuasion left over to pay for them. I'd like to take a moment and talk about this card from the reserve, because it has an arrow beneath its cost, and others will as well. This just means that after paying for that card, you gain what's showing below the arrow, in this case, 1 victory point. Now, you only get a reward like this at the time you buy the card, not each time you play the card. Also note, the game doesn't provide a physical way for you to track your remaining persuasion, because any you don't spend during a reveal turn are lost. So buy as many cards as you can or wish to, and ignore any leftover persuasion you may have. Anytime you pay for and take a card from the Imperium row, replace it right away with a new one from the top of the deck. You can then continue spending leftover persuasion. So I could purchase any one of these, including the one that I just revealed, again, assuming that I can afford it. Any cards you acquire during the game go right to your discard pile, which is kept face up to the side of your leader. You'll draw these cards in future rounds once your deck runs out and you have to reshuffle your discard pile into a new deck. The next step of your turn is to set your strength based on the troops and sandworms you have in your conflict area here. Any troops in your garrison are ignored. They are not contributing to the conflict. Now, as we're shown in this corner, every cube is worth 2 and every sandworm is worth 3. So here I have a total strength of 2, 4, 6, plus 3 for 9. And I indicate this by setting my combat marker to that value on this track. Cards you revealed during your reveal turn may also have provided you with sword symbols, which, as we see here, are worth 1 strength each, so I'd go up 1 more. If you would ever have more than 20 strength in the conflict, just flip your marker over to the 20 plus side and keep counting from the start of the track again. So being on this space would mean I have a total strength of 24. Your total strength in the conflict will come into play later in the round, but with it set, as the last step of your reveal turn, you send all of the cards in front of you, both from your agent turns and your reveal turn, over to your discard pile. Now, as mentioned, once you've completed a reveal turn, you won't take any more turns during this phase, and instead the other players will continue taking agent turns until everyone has either chosen or been forced to take their own reveal turns, which brings everyone to the next phase of the round, combat. Starting with the first player and going clockwise around and around the table, each person with at least one piece in the conflict area can choose to play any number of intrigue cards from their hand that have this combat keyword at the bottom and would affect strength values in the conflict. Now, if you have no troops in the conflict, only in the garrison or your supply, like this player, then you can't play combat intrigue cards. But for this example, we will assume that they do have some pieces in the conflict. Let's say the first player here chose to play this card. It says they can either increase their strength by 2 points or retreat any number of their troops back to their garrison. We'll have them choose to gain 2 strength, but either way, you would adjust their combat marker accordingly. If you choose to pass rather than play a combat intrigue card, you can still play one or more if it comes back around to your turn again later. However, as soon as all players have passed consecutively, no more cards can be played, and then it's time to resolve the conflict. Here, everyone with pieces in the conflict compares their strength. The player with the most gains the top reward shown on the face-up conflict card. The player with the second highest strength gains the second place reward. If you only have 3 players, as we do here, then no one gains the third place reward. This is only given to the player with the third highest strength if you have a 4-player game. I should also mention, any player who doesn't have any of their pieces in the conflict, let's just say this player hadn't, they won't have any strength value and cannot receive any of the rewards. Next, I need to explain what happens if you have ties in strength, and I've just simplified the scores to help show this. If 2 or more players are tied for first in strength, then no one gains the first place reward, and instead they each gain the second place reward. So 3 solari each in this case. When you have a tie for first in a 3-player game like we have here, that means no other reward is given out, so this blue player would gain nothing. However, let's say we had a 4-player game. When there's a tie for first place, they each get the second place reward, and anyone in second place gains the third place reward. With 4 players, if you had a tie for second place, the first place person still gets the first place reward, but then everyone tied for second gets the third place reward instead, and nothing else would be rewarded. And if players ever tie for third place, none of those players get anything. Whether there were ties or not, if a player had 1 or more sandworms in the conflict, they double the reward they receive. So if I won second place and had a sandworm in this conflict, I'd get 6 solari. Sometimes a reward gives the option to pay for a benefit. Here, a player winning first place would normally get to increase their relationship with any one faction, and then if they want, they can spend 3 spice to earn a victory point. On the other hand, if they won the first place reward using a sandworm, they'd get to increase their relationship with any 2 factions by 1, or the same faction twice, and then spend 3 spice for 1 victory point, or 6 spice for 2. In addition to the rewards on a conflict card, if there's only a single player in first place, even if there were ties for places lower down, the ultimate winner of the conflict also collects the conflict card to put in front of themselves. Now, if there had been a tie for first place, no one would get the card, and it can just be returned to the box. The next thing about these conflict cards we need to be aware of is that each will have one of 3 possible battle icons in their top right-hand corner. Each time you gain a new conflict card, check to see if its symbol matches the symbol on any other face-up conflict card you already have in front of yourself, or on the objective card that you were dealt during the setup. As soon as you have a matching pair of symbols, as we do here, you flip both of the matching cards face down and then gain a victory point. And you gain a point like this for each icon pair you create during the game. There's also a conflict with a question mark for its battle icon, and this can be paired with any other battle icon to gain a point. However, unlike other pairs you create which you immediately turn in for a victory point, you cannot pair another card with the one showing the question mark until the game is ended during final scoring, which we'll learn about later. So even though technically I could pair this card with either of these, I can't do it right now. Only during final scoring can I use it to create a pair. All right, there's one more possible reward we should go over, and it's this symbol known as a control flag. Gaining this benefit means that you place one of your flag tokens into the control outline of the indicated space. This is called Secure Imperial Basin, so we put it here at the Imperial Basin. However, if an opponent already has one of their tokens there, they would first take it back, and then you would add your token. There are two benefits that come from a control flag. First of all, anytime you or another player puts an agent on the related space, the person with the control flag now gains the related reward here. In this case, 1 spice from the supply. Additionally, and this is easy to forget, so I want to make sure I emphasize this, but anytime you reveal a conflict card in the future, and it shares the name of a space where you have a control flag, you may immediately choose to move 1 troop from your supply directly into the conflict. Either way, once all the rewards from the current conflict have been given out, each player returns all the troops they had in the conflict back to their personal supply, not back to their garrison. All sandworms are returned to the general supply, and all combat markers are reset back to 0. And that covers the conflict step. And with it resolved, it's time to move to the 4th phase of the round, known as Makers. Check each space of the board showing what is known as a Maker symbol. If there's no agent at that location, add a single spice from the supply to that spot. In this way, if one of these locations doesn't receive an agent for several rounds in a row, the amount of spice here will continue to increase. But then the first player to send an agent to one of these spaces will get the normal listed benefit, as well as every spice that accumulated there. And now we arrive at the 5th and final phase of a round, the recall phase. First, check to see if any player has 10 or more victory points, or if the conflict deck is empty. If either of these things are true, the game ends and you check to see who won. But let's assume neither of these things have happened, and in that situation, you now prepare for the next round. First, every player collects their agents from wherever they are on the board, returning them to their leader's mat. Then you pass the first player marker clockwise and begin a new round. Now, if instead the round had ended at the end of the 5th phase, remember, at that time, and only at that time, you check to see if someone has 10 or more points, or if the conflict deck is empty. If either of those things have happened, then the game ends, and it's time to determine the winner. Here, each person plays any intrigue cards they are holding with the endgame keyword here, resolving their effects, which may give them additional victory points or other benefits. You'll notice the score track only goes to 12, but you can earn more than 12 victory points. Just keep track of your actual total. Either way, whoever has the most points wins. In the case of a tie, the tied player with the most spice wins. And if there's still a tie, the tied player with the most solari wins. And if still tied, the tied player with the most water wins. And finally, if still tied, the tied player with the most garrisoned troops wins. If the tie isn't broken by that point, the tied players share the victory. And that's everything you need to know to play the game with 3 or 4 players. That said, this included booklet explains how to play solo and 2-player games using these included decks that provide an automated opponent that will take actions along with the human players. But no matter how many players you have, you can always use the included CHOAM Module expansion. So let's go through its unique elements and see how they work. As you might remember, the CHOAM Module components are marked with this symbol. And during the setup, you'll shuffle the 4 CHOAM Intrigue cards into the related deck. Do the same with the 4 CHOAM Imperium cards, shuffling them into the Imperium deck before you flip 5 face up to create the Imperium row. Also make sure you include this leader among the options that players have to pick from. This expansion uses the included tokens with this back, known as the contracts. Now, some of these will have a dark green border, but these are only used when you're playing with the Rise of Ix expansion you can pick up separately. And you can read this section of the Dune Imperium Uprising rulebook to learn how these are used in that case. But when you're not using this expansion, return these to the box. The regular contracts we shuffle into a face-down pile, or piles as I've done here, dealing 2 of them into these spaces of the board marked for them. That covers the setup adjustments for this module, and now, anytime you'd resolve a CHOAM icon effect, like we see here, you pick one of the 2 face-up contracts on the board and add it to your personal supply. Then replace it with a new one from the stacks beside the board. Now, if these stacks run out, after a player claims a contract, you'll be left with only one contract here. This means the next time someone would resolve one of these icons, they have to take the remaining contract. Once all of the contracts have been collected for the rest of the game, anytime you would resolve this CHOAM symbol, you gain 2 Solari instead, as you're reminded of here. When a player has a contract, if they can complete it, they'll gain the benefit it shows. Some, like the one we see here, is resolved as soon as a player sends an agent to the indicated space. For example, as soon as a player with this contract goes to the highliner space, this contract is complete and they gain the reward showing on the right, in this case, 2 water tokens. When you complete a contract that's in your supply, announce that you've completed it, gain the related reward, and then flip it face down. But keep it because certain cards will refer to your completed contracts, which a token like this counts as. Now be aware, if you gain a contract involving a space that you had sent an agent to previously, or even during the same turn, you don't get to automatically complete the contract. You can only satisfy the requirement of a contract by sending an agent to the required space after you've obtained it. There are a few other types of requirements you'll find on contracts. Ones labeled as harvests require sending an agent to a maker board space and gaining at least as much spice as it shows during a single turn, 4 in this case. And the required spice can come from that space along with any gained from the card you played. So let's say we played this card to send our agent here. We would gain 2 spice for the space's effect, plus this spice that's already there. And by satisfying this requirement, we'd gain our 4th spice, completing this contract and gaining the benefit. Some contracts have an acquire effect. This means you complete it by acquiring the indicated card. In this case, one of these The Spice Must Flow cards. Finally, you may also gain an immediate contract. With these, you complete the contract just by gaining it, collect the indicated benefit, and flip it face down. And that covers the rules for the included CHOAM Module expansion. But that's not all. There are also rules for 6-player games, where the players will split into 2 teams of 3 players each, led by a player on each team who will take the role of commander. And each commander gains a unique starting deck and personal board. And you'll also find instructions on how to combine Dune Imperium Uprising with other previously released Dune Imperium products like Rise of Ix, Immortality, and even the original base game. But all these various other ways of playing I'll leave for you to discover on your own. Though I'll mention the game also has an app that you can download for your PC, phone, or tablet that streamlines the solo and 2-player experience. But otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Dune Imperium Uprising. If you have any questions about anything you saw in this video, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.